Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for April 17th, 2025. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone about our meeting format. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting is being held in person and on Zoom. We are also broadcasting this meeting on Channel 8, wheatridgespeaks.org. When it's time for public comment, those who wish to comment on our Zoom connection, use the raise your hand button. And if you're dialing in, press star 9, raise your hand, and star 6 to unmute your phone. If you do not plan to speak, we recommend you simply view the meeting live by watching Channel 8 on Wheat Ridge Speak or on wheatridgespeaks.org. We appreciate the public's participation in tonight's meeting, and we hope to create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue, and we appreciate your help in this process. Can I get a roll call of members, please?
Cody Hedges.
Here.
Christine Disney.
Here.
Danielle Gravy.
Here.
Patrick Quinn.
Here.
Susan Wood.
Here.
Michael Moore.
Here.
And Krista Holub and Sierra Quiones are absent tonight.
Thank you. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thanks, everyone. The next item on the agenda will be to approve the order of the agenda. If there are no changes to the order as presented, that will stand as approved. Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next item of business is approval of minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? Whatever that was.
I move to approve the minutes from March 6, 2025.
Second.
Thank you. Have a proper motion and second, and thank you for the clarification on the date, which I'm fumbling with. Can we get a poll of the commission, please?
Motion approved 5-0 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. Next order of business is going to be the public forum. Interest in public forum. Now time for any person to speak on any subject that is not appearing on the agenda. If you plan to speak on an item that is on tonight's agenda, please wait until we get to those items. Do we have anyone signed to speak? Thank you. Our next order will be excuse me. You know, I read this and had this all down, and now I'm fumbling. We have a couple of public hearings tonight, so we'll just get right to it. Mr. Moore, would you present our first case number, please?
Thank you. Case number ZOA-25-1, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding freestanding emergency departments.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation from staff?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Gianna Easley, the Planning Manager for the city, and I'll be presenting the freestanding emergency department item for this evening. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the case file as well as the packet materials. I'll start off explaining our current code. Currently, our code does not allow freestanding emergency departments, and the history of this decision dates back to 2015 when there was a code interpretation limiting freestanding emergency rooms to hospital campuses only. And then at that point in time, of course, Lutheran had the only ER in Wheat Ridge, which worked because it was centrally located. And then with the proliferation of freestanding emergency rooms or emergency departments throughout the metro area, City Council adopted a series of moratoriums from 2016 to 2018, allowing time to evaluate the land use and any potential state action around billing practices and licensure. In 2018, City Council created or adopted Code Section 26-643, which defined and prohibited freestanding emergency rooms because of Wheat Ridge's size and also because Lutheran was so centrally located. With Lutheran's move to the west side of the city, state legislation around regulating and licensing freestanding emergency departments, as well as a proposal to repurpose and centrally locate a freestanding emergency department within a medical campus setting, staff believes it is an appropriate time to reevaluate the prohibition. And so for some additional background, HCA Health One, which operates Rose Hospital, is looking at purchasing the old Midas property site and the adjacent Wilmore Center to build a medical campus, which would include a freestanding emergency department building. The site is at the northwest corner of 38th Avenue in Wadsworth, and I don't have slides up, but I can bring them up if we need to. So basically, all I have is I've got a zoning map and I've got a vicinity map, which was included in your packet. So if we need to, I can bring those up during discussion or whenever it's relevant. The site is zoned mixed-use commercial, or MUC, as is the surrounding area all the way up and down Wadsworth. So the freestanding emergency department would have to include medical offices along with it in order to create a medical campus. The MUC zone districts are generally located along commercial corridors and at community and employment activity centers. MUC zone districts are established to encourage medium to high density mixed-use development, including residential, civic, and a variety of commercial and retail uses. City Council, at its study session on March 3rd of this year, discussed the proposed code amendment and directed staff to proceed with preparing an ordinance for consideration. And then, thank you for the questions from the commissioners. As additional background, the city does allow urgent care and community clinics, and there are a few in Wheat Ridge. Those are considered a medical office use, and that's basically because of how they operate. They do not typically have ambulance service and are located either in freestanding buildings or in shopping centers that allow the medical office use. Also, their size is much smaller because they are not required to co-locate with other medical office uses, and they typically serve walk-in customers with more minor conditions that do not require a trip to the ER. Regarding the size, 5 acres was chosen because a requirement for freestanding emergency departments is to have the integrated medical offices, laboratories, and associated facilities along with them to create a medical campus. The freestanding emergency department portion may take up only half of the site, but then the other related uses add up to needing a larger site. In addition to that, having a larger site will help with screening and buffering from adjacent uses. Using Rose as an example, the 5 acres seemed reasonable as a minimum acreage should another freestanding emergency department want to locate within the city. So the proposed zoning code amendment, with changes to state law, the move of Lutheran Hospital to the west side of the city, and the request by Rose Medical, staff are recommending that the municipal code be updated to conditionally allow freestanding emergency departments within a medical campus in the mixed-use commercial zone district. The code would include language that any freestanding emergency department must be co-located with other medical uses such as office, clinic, and laboratory uses on a site of at least 5 acres in size. Along with that, the table of medical uses by zone district would be updated, and the terminology would also be updated to say, instead of freestanding emergency room, freestanding emergency department, or FSED, which is the term established by the Colorado legislature when they enacted mandatory licensure of freestanding ERs through House Bill 19-1010. So with that, I thank you, and I'm here for any questions that you have. And we also do have some members from Rose here in case we have any operational questions.
Thanks, Jana. So Rose won't be giving any kind of presentation right now?
No, since this is a rezoning and they're not at site plan or anything, really the consideration under request is just the conditionally allowing the freestanding emergency departments as a campus, medical campus, is really all we're considering tonight.
Okay. Guess we'll go to questions from commissioners. We have questions? Thank you.
Yeah, so my question, I want to go back to this point that you made about the purpose of mixed-use commercial zones. So you had mentioned that in these zones, we already allow medical offices, so urgent care facilities and community clinics, which are geared towards ambulatory services, so walking, right? But walking, strolling, something like that. Right? And so when I look at the mixed-use commercial zone district purpose, 3 things kind of jump out to me. The first one is that they note that it's supposed to promote development of creating a balanced mix of land uses. The other one is that it's supposed to promote use by pedestrian, bicyclists, and transit users in addition to automobiles and encourage active lifestyles. So when I see these freestanding emergency rooms, one thing that really jumps out to me is the fact that it's now introducing an ambulance service into what would have been an urgent care facility or community clinic that's already allowed, right? And so I'm having trouble seeing how adding that ambulance service to this location helps promote the mixed-use commercial purposes. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Good question, Commissioner Hedges. I think that we have to remember that this entire area along Wadsworth, and again, I can bring up a slide showing the zoning, the mixed-use commercial is intended along major arterials where you do have that higher traffic. There were ambulatory services just down the street until recently, with the hospital being there. And the commercial area caters to automobile traffic. I don't want to say primarily, but it truly is a major arterial, and the traffic along Wadsworth is always going to be there. The city is spending approximately $60 million on the Wadsworth project to make it more walkable. And that includes some wide sidewalks and other facilities. The goal is to achieve a balance in the area, even though it is a more auto-oriented corridor and will be. So in this case, it's not a location such as, the downtown area near 38th Avenue, where perhaps that use would be less appropriate and we would not be looking to allow this particular use on a corridor like that. It would be restricted to these much more highly trafficked corridors within the city.
So I guess one thought that I had with that is we are, spending the $60 million to make it more pedestrian friendly. And thinking back to the 5th, which is the last time we were here, we had the comprehensive plan update that's coming through. And one of the examples they used was like street-facing infrastructure and street-facing buildings, which is where I think I'm having the biggest difficulty with this corridor. And I also noticed that we have mixed-use commercial interstate as another zone. And so I was wondering, does it make more sense to say that something like this could be allowed in an MUC, I guess INT, the interstate MUC, rather than MUC commercial? Because even though Wadsworth is an arterial road, I think putting in that ambulance service still seems contradictory to the vision that we have for Wadsworth. And we have a zone district that I think is more appropriate, which is the MUC interstate. I don't know, it's not really a question, but I guess maybe if you could speak to the MUC commercial versus interstate and that.
Sure. I think one of the things is this is centrally located within the city, and we lost our emergency room to the west side, which is not a bad thing, but it does create a little bit of a dead space, I would say, for emergency rooms. And I do have a map that I can pull up and I can show you if you haven't yet looked at Google on where are the other emergency rooms. They're about 4 miles off in either direction. And so this location is actually quite centrally located. And again, it's an arterial roadway. It's a major arterial. And so being along the highway might serve some purpose, but the thing is it also, because we are asking that this be a conditionally allowed use with a medical campus associated with it, there are people who will use alternative forms of transportation to come and visit, for instance, if they had a women's clinic or if they had an orthopedic clinic or something like that. Maybe they need to go get lab tests. So that was one of the reasons that we conditioned it. And speaking to the, what I would call the build to, I know in the city plan, on one of the place types and one of the tools being used within that, hopefully will get adopted soon, was bringing some buildings. For instance, if you were to take one of the larger shopping centers, the Big Lots Center or the Safeway Center, and putting some commercial up toward the street, and then utilizing the sidewalks that we are building along that Wadsworth corridor to really have a better street presence on there. And likewise, if this zoning, conditional zoning were to be approved, we would still require, there's still a build to required in the MUC, which would bring the buildings closer to Wadsworth, for example, closer to the 38th. So it would still have that presence that would be similar to if you had a different type of commercial user utilizing a pad site that was closer to Wadsworth on one of the bigger commercial centers.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood.
I just had a follow-up question. The only thing that occurred to me as I read through it is that at what point in time will, like, say, a Health One comes in to develop the site, at what point will any potential impacts to the area be looked at? Like, for instance, the things that Commissioner Hedges has indicated, maybe some concern with, such as traffic and the ambulance bays and the in and out, because I feel sure there is a point that they'll be looked at, but it would give me just comfort to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. We would require a traffic impact study. And as we do with high automotive type uses, and that could be anything from a new shopping center to other things that create a higher impact of traffic. There are some, on Wadsworth, the way that they've designed it is around the Midas building, there's an entrance north of that that's actually north of the Resus building there that's on Wadsworth, just north of the old Midas building. The entrance coming in would actually, and do you want me to share my screen so that we can look at a map? I don't know if that would be useful. Yes? Okay. Let me, Tammy, would you, okay, great, thank you. Fancy technology. Okay, all right, so let me, okay. All right. I don't know what the little title at the top saying the room is not enabled for screen being conference means, but it disappeared. Okay. So you should see on your screen, are you seeing just the one screen or are you seeing my two screens? Okay, good. I've got the obnoxious next slide on mine. So, this is the proposed site that HCA Health One is looking at. And if you'll notice, I don't know if I can point to anything, but there's a notch out along Wadsworth, and that's the Rhesus facility. And at this point, that is not included as part of the site. To the north of that, is there a way to point? I guess not. To the north of that is an entrance, this one? Oh, very good. Thank you. Laser pointer. Oh, laser pointer. I found a laser pointer. This is excellent. Learning all sorts of things. Okay, so there's an entrance in that comes in, I think it's right here. And so there's an entrance off of Wadsworth. The new plans for Wadsworth and the way it's been constructed actually close off access along the Midas site completely. And so the traffic could enter from the northern end of the site along Wadsworth up here. And then this, I believe, is to be determined. Right now, we've got an access point on 38th where it enters the Wilmore Center. I don't know if there are any plans in the works that would move that access point more central to the site or not, but as of right now, this is the current entrance. Do you know? Okay, we think it's staying the same. So where the Midas building is located is actually probably pretty close to within the Build To area. And so, for instance, a freestanding emergency department with a medical campus could be located up in this area. And then the rest of the site, whether attached or detached, could be repurposed into the rest of the medical campus. But I wanted to just point out the access points that are currently planned with the Wadsworth reconstruction and widening. And then moving over to the zoning, just to show you where the site sits in relationship to the mixed-use commercial zoning. This is you've got Safeway along here, and then you've got the Ross Big Lots down here. This next door, this is actually an office. I believe this is an office use. It's zoned RC, resident restricted commercial, and then planned commercial development is actually over here to the west. So there's actually some portions of this that are within that either MUC or some other type of commercial district adjacent to it. Again, this corridor, this is about the extent of the MUC in this location, but it runs quite a distance along Wadsworth. And that's where all of our heavier, I will call them heavier commercial uses are, as opposed to neighborhood commercial uses. And then here's a map. I pulled this up just today because I was curious. The site I have marked with, oh, I lost my pointer. There we go. The little yellow star here, and then the nearest emergency room facilities as notated by Google Maps. And so you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a dead spot in this location. And I believe that that's probably part of the reason for the request in this location, and that the site is large enough, which sometimes it's hard to find a large site because our infill sites are sometimes quite a bit smaller.
Commissioner Disney.
Would the existing businesses that are located on this site now, for instance, there's an imaging center for mammograms and CAT scans. There's also a podiatrist. There's some fast food. There's several other businesses. Would those all be gone then?
I don't know if the plan would be to incorporate some of the existing medical users, but the intent is to create a medical campus. And so the subway and cleaners and those would no longer be there because it would turn into a medical campus.
And as I understand it, there will be an ambulance service here.
That's correct, because with freestanding emergency rooms, whether or not you're at a hospital or otherwise, usually what happens in a freestanding emergency room is you go in with something like you think you're having a heart attack, and if they determine, yeah, you're probably having a heart attack, then what they would do is the ambulance would come pick you up and take you into the nearest hospital or hospital of their choice, I suppose, if the patient had a choice. But these are really for more serious conditions. So if there was an accidental drug overdose, serious bodily injury, that your closest emergency room would be this facility. Those are the instance of, I think I'm having a heart attack. These would be the types of uses that would typically go to an emergency room setting versus an urgent care, because they do have the ability to have the ambulance come in. They would have probably a portico share, drive up under, kind of like the old Lutheran and the new Lutheran have, but on a much smaller scale. And then sometimes they're able to resolve the problem. I've been to, on a personal level, I've been to a couple of freestanding emergency rooms near where I live. And in one instance, I was transported to a local hospital. On another instance, my husband was actually taken care of there but he was having an emergency, and he was actually taken care of there in the emergency room facility and did not have to be transported. But it's more of I'm having a life-threatening situation here, I believe, and urgent care isn't enough, and the hospital is maybe too far.
So I'm just I'm kind of understanding what Commissioner Hedges was saying about contributing to the
Yeah,
neighborhood and the atmosphere and
yeah.
walkable, and I'm just thinking about ambulance noise in the neighborhood. Again, it's gone now. It's nice that it's not there anymore with the hospital being gone. I live in that quadrant. And I get that there's an empty space, but it doesn't seem like we're that far away from Lutheran. So I'm just questioning if it's really necessary, what happens to the businesses that are there. They're being kind of moved out. So that's what I was basing my questions on. Thank you.
Sure. We do have folks from Rose here who might be able to answer some of the operational characteristics, such as frequency of ambulances and that sort of thing. Would that be helpful?
That'd be great.
Okay. No, just explain the operational. Yeah, come on up to the podium and then state your name and address for the record.
My name's Casey Goober. I'm the president and CEO of Rose Medical Center. Colorado native. Dad was born at Rose. Son was born at Rose. Uncles were born at Rose.
Can you spell your last name for me and give me your address?
Yeah, it's Casey, C-A-S-E-Y, Goober, G-U-B-E-R. And I live at 2875 North Glencoe in Denver. So I-70-ish.
Thank you.
I think a few things. One, thank you guys for the time. We've started looking at the west side of town, especially since Lutheran moved farther west, and we've started talking with city council over the last 2 years, various community groups in Applewood, Golden, Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, Sloan's Lake, Highlands, et cetera. And I think there is actually a really big need right now. In talking to West Metro Fire, their fire chief, and talking to Denver Health, you guys aren't actually seeing a whole lot of patients getting transferred to Lutheran because of the proximity and where it is right now, especially for District 1 and District 2. Freestanding emergency departments are a great safety net for a community because we can treat the life-threatening care needs of heart attack, stroke, broken bones, et cetera. And we can also treat the needs of lumps and bumps at any time. We have a board-certified physician that will be there 24/7, 365 days a year. We have nurses, we have on-site CT, X-ray, ultrasound, and lab. So really it is a pop-off valve and safety net for emergency services. In talking to Dr. Halfland, or in talking to Mr. Halfland, the chief at Westside Fire, District 1 and District 2 are a little bit compromised right now. And then also in talking to Gary, who's the chief paramedic at Denver Health, and they know that I'm talking on behalf of them. District 1 and District 2 are a little compromised right now too, just because of the geography of where Lutheran is now. It's about a 15 to 20 minute drive depending on traffic. It's 5 miles now, et cetera. I actually had Gary, who's the chief paramedic, pull a bunch of ambulance records of transport to various other freestanding EDs in the company. Pulled over 100 records. 0 of the ambulances had lights and sirens either going into them or from them. So when it comes to noise and traffic count, I'm not that worried. We see mostly walk-in patients or private motor vehicle patients coming into freestanding EDs. I operate one right now. It's in Central Park in Northfield. We average 12 to 16 patients a day. About 1 of those is an ambulance patient, so very minimal ambulance traffic, but for someone that has a kid that broke their arm, that needs an x-ray, that may be after 7 o'clock when urgent cares are down, that don't want to go and wait at a level 1 trauma center, we can get them in on average of 5 minutes to see a doctor. So it is really quick, efficient, quality care. We're going to use the same doctors that we have at our hospital, at Swedish Medical Center, at Aurora Medical Center. It's not like it's a different caliber physician or nursing team. It's the exact same that you would get at our facility, which is truly world-class. I think the other thing to note is when we've been talking with the city council and Patrick, what they really wanted was a medical campus and community, not just a freestanding emergency department. And I think, as you guys know, if you know Rose Medical Center, we have the reputation of women's health. We deliver more babies in Denver and the region than anywhere else. We actually deliver more babies that originate from Wheat Ridge than any other facility, even Lutheran. We represent over 25% of the OB market in terms of delivery share in the city of Wheat Ridge. And our goal would be able to expand the services to you guys as well, whether it's women's health, whether it's orthopedic care, or whether it's partnering with our children's hospital, Rocky Mountain Children's at PSL, to bring pediatric care to the west side of town, which is a big, big gap right now too. So we're truly looking at this on how we fill the community need. And we think, based on where 38th and Wadsworth is, it's the perfect location. It's between District 1, it's between District 2, it's between District 3, it's between District 4. It can serve that geographic spread that is not currently being served or is being less served by Lutheran right now. Like I said, 60% of your ED visits right now, prior to Lutheran moving to the west side of town, were already leaving the city of Wheat Ridge. They were going to other hospitals, and we think that is going to increase now because of the geographic barrier that it presents. I think some other kind of notes with ambulances, if there's an ambulance that needs to take a patient from the freestanding ED to a hospital, we pay for that ambulance ride. So it's not like it's on the patient. There's also been price transparency laws that she mentioned that are now there. So there's no surprise billing. That is a state law that we abide by, which is great. And we think will be a really good complement to kind of your community need. And we've done a lot of research on this. Yeah, of course. I don't know if that helped or not. So.
Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation. I was a Rose baby myself. Just saying. I just a couple of questions. One of them was, Jana, you mentioned that the freestanding ED would be maybe half the site. Do we know, and maybe the gentleman who just spoke, is there like an average, like if it's a 5-acre site, like the other freestanding EDs, like what's their footprint in terms of a comparable type of facility?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a best practice for them. They're about 11,000 square feet. Within that, like I said, it'll be full-scale imaging services, so CT, X-ray, ultrasound. We will also have about 11 bays. So one of those bays will be designated for any trauma. One of those bays will be designated for any psych needs that your community may need, and it'll be a psych safe room to ensure the safety of those patients that may be going through a behavioral health episode. And then one of them will be a more private kind of female-oriented need in case there's something going on that needs a little bit more privacy. But we do this exceptionally well. We have, I think, 7 of them around the Metro Denver area. I worked in Wichita, Kansas for I don't know, 5.5 years during my career, and we had two very, very busy ones that the community definitely gravitated towards, as opposed to level one trauma centers, where you could get bumped because other people are coming in from the mountains with a more severe injury. And if your son or daughter is coming in with pneumonia, you may be waiting there for a while. On average, our Central Park freestanding emergency department is a 5-minute wait to see a doctor. And that's the efficiency that we bring in the high quality care we bring. But 11,000 square feet. And then we've got a few different design renderings for the medical office building. So we can use the existing footprint of what's in Wilmore, the larger kind of L-shaped or V-shaped one. We're going to turn that into Class A space. Or we also have a potential rendering of taking that down and building a brand new medical office building. I think there were some questions around what the tenants are going to be doing. I think you're actually going to see a lot of those tenants. They've already signed leases on the Lutheran campus that are medical, so I think you're going to see a gap in that as well. If Touchstone Images moves, which we're hearing they are, we plan on bringing a mammography center to that area to fill those women's needs as well. So I think we've got a pretty good medical plan to really complement and then elevate the city in terms of medical care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had one other quick one, and this is probably more appropriate for the city. My understanding is some of the concerns in the past about freestanding EDs related to the impact of that type of facility on medical costs that were incurred by patients. And a lot of that, as far as I recall these discussions, was kind of about confusion. You know, most folks, I think, associate freestanding medical with urgent care rather than emergency care. I think most people think of the ER as part of a hospital. And so I guess my question is, was there any consideration about signage in particular and any efforts to ensure that folks were not going to go to an emergency facility when they don't need that level of care, and that might result in a much higher bill and kind of burden on them financially?
Wait, that is way beyond my expertise, so I'm going to ask Casey to come back up.
I just didn't know if signage was something that would have been appropriate.
I think two things. One, there was some legislation passed, I think roughly 5 years ago, where there is price transparency across kind of all hospital departments. So I am required to post that on the website so that there's no surprise billing, so that people know the exact cost. Two, we have to abide by different signage regulations in terms of emergency departments. So on the ambulance bay, there will be an ambulance sign. On the ER, there will be an ER sign. We also have plans on the corner of 38th and Wads to develop a monument sign with the city. So there'll be the City of Wheat Ridge logo. To the right of it, I think we're starting to plan some Wheat Ridge specific artwork to incorporate into the Wadsworth Art Project, just because we know that that's really important to the city in terms of look. And then potentially a digital sign that also makes sure that the community knows it's an emergency department. And then we can also show the other services that will be available on that campus as well. So we've got a really good signage plan, and there's various state and city ordinances that we do need to follow. So we follow the code.
Great. Thank
You
you.
want me to stay up here?
Sorry, I know I'm making, making you get your steps in.
Yeah.
I think those probably answer my questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy. Thanks.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you for staying up.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit more self-serving, but as a father of a toddler,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about pediatrics.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a father of a 4 and a 6-year-old. My 6-year-old 2 years ago, compound fracture. We took her to Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children. That's downtown Denver. So they've got an array of pediatric subspecialties that we partner with. I think the beauty of doing this as Health One is like, it's not just one hospital, it's not just Rose, but like you're going to have access to Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children that has pediatric ortho, pediatric ID, pediatric urology, genetics, all of that service. We're looking to bring peds, we're looking to bring women's, we're looking to bring ortho, we're looking to bring imaging, and we're looking to bring the ED. So I think it's a great gateway to the West where there really isn't a whole lot of peds right now. And I think as we do it as a Health One family, you're getting the best of all the hospitals, which is great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jana, for the presentation, and thanks for staying up there. I have a couple. You answered some of my questions, and then a few just popped into my head. First one is probably towards you, Jana. Since this will be a conditional for multi-use commercial, that's pretty much that whole corridor up and down Wadsworth, right? Or when you say can you kind of clarify that for
Sure. Yeah, in the mixed-use commercial zone district, which is up and down Wadsworth, I can bring that slide back up. You're correct. In any of the mixed-use commercial zone districts, a freestanding emergency department as part of a medical campus would have to comply with the conditions, and that basically has to be a minimum of 5 acres, and has to have all those other medical services to create a small campus. So in any of these areas, you're correct. This would be across all mixed-use commercial zoning.
Perfect. And this weird shape that this is at, is this because these are the boundaries of whoever owns the property right now?
Yes, they have. I didn't realize in your packet, you will see that I did not put the northern leg onto the vicinity map because I did not realize that was a part of it. But in looking at the assessor's maps, it actually is. So this is the, yes, rather odd-shaped property at the moment.
And now, the one you're probably all going to hate me for. And I know the answer, but people are going to ask. And so here goes. We just got rid of Lutheran, an emergency room 300 yards down the street. Why are we going to allow this here? I know because Lutheran's changing zoning with all of that, but those are when people approach us, what are we going to say?
I think that's a great question, and I actually had that question originally also when I first heard about this. But if you think about it, this would now be a conditional use within a mixed-use commercial zone district. The hospital has residential all the way around it. It's better suited probably to have those mix of residential uses and maybe some small supporting commercial on that site that would serve neighborhoods more so than along an arterial boulevard.
Great, thank you.
And we were,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we were really intentional with what the property was because, again, I didn't want to contribute to neighborhood noise. I didn't want to contribute to the perception of ambulance traffic going throughout neighborhoods. The old Lutheran campus is pretty unique because it's right across the street from a bunch of houses. And if you look at this plot, it's pretty protected in terms of not being by rooftops. There was some other stuff on Wadsworth we were looking at, but it backed up to apartments, and I think we wanted to be really, really conscious of it. Also, if you look up to the west of this property, we actually have a surgery center right there. So there's literally one right across the alley that we already own and operate. So there is already kind of medical precedent with us right there, and that's been in existence for a while. It's Clear Creek Surgery Center. So I think we're, again, just trying to do the right thing in the right location. The traffic count there is about 60,000 cars a day, and we're anticipating 20 to 30 emergency department visits, whether it's walk-in or a few ambulances. We don't think that count's going to go up too much.
Perfect. And one more I know we'll get. Was there any consideration in repurposing the Lutheran site, and why couldn't we?
For me, again, I think I wanted to be on two major thoroughfares and have the protection for the neighborhood so that there wasn't that kind of, perception of additional traffic bothering the neighborhood. I would rather be on two arterials, and I think that development plan that the city had kind of progressing was already kind of going down the path, and developers were already starting to get organized. And we were lucky enough to find this property that just makes a lot of sense. And again, when you look at the city-county map, it's right in the middle of District 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's right in the border. So we truly wanted to serve the entire Wheat Ridge community.
And I would add to that, that the Lutheran site, as soon as we found out that Lutheran was moving, we started the process with the Lutheran Legacy Campus Master Plan, which is now 4 years old. And so the plan for that did not call for that to be repurposed into another hospital. It called for an integration of a mix of housing types and densities and that sort of thing, that would be so it's so much in proximity to the other residential uses around it, that plan, which was very much community driven, I think did not necessarily want another medical campus or repurposing of the Lutheran campus. The folks who participated in the creation of that master plan, they looked at, I know there were a lot of meetings, it predates me, but there was a lot of public outreach. And it really, it is a creation from the community of what they wanted to see there. And it was not another hospital or another emergency room.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And shame on Pat. I didn't close the public hearing and I didn't ask if there was anyone on Zoom that wanted from the public to speak. I assume I get a pass.
Nobody on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. I will now close the public hearing and we'll have a motion from Commissioner Moore. Oh, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
I was curious about, you kept referring to build to requirements. Could you explain those more in terms of what are the build to requirements, and are they what requirements? Are they mays or shalls? Like, how does that work out?
No, they're shells, and the build to requirements range from, I believe it's 0 to 12 feet. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, actually, if you look on the map right now, where the Pierogies factory dot is, that's the Corners development, and those buildings were required to meet a build to. So that means the buildings are located close to the sidewalk. They've got pedestrian connections, even if they're rear loaded, like entrances on the parking lot side. They still have to have some sort of pedestrian connection into the site, and it orients the buildings to the street and kind of hides the parking behind it. So that's what a build to requirement is.
And is that along 38th and Wads, or just one or the other?
Yeah, we have various build to requirements in the city along Wadsworth and 38th. So this site, it's corner lot, it would apply to both. But yeah, 38th has actually more strict requirements. They've got to be like right on the street for new development. Wadsworth, given that it's a little bit more auto oriented, they're a little bit further back, but they still have to be oriented to the street. So the Pierogies factory building is meeting the Wadsworth and 38th requirement.
Thank you. Any other questions from Commission? Okay, now you're up, Mr. Moore.
I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding freestanding emergency departments.
Thank you. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? We'll start with commissioners. We'll go this way. Wood.
I appreciate the conversation tonight. I appreciate the answering of the questions. I appreciate the questions by the commissioners as well. I think they're very good questions and really dug into the depth of this and really looked into it. When I first read it, I had no concerns other than wanting to have an understanding of how any negative impacts that might be caused, how those might be treated, or that they would be addressed and then treated. And I think that's definitely been addressed here tonight. I think it's worthy of consideration that there are, within a mixed-use MUC development, there are a lot of different uses that could occur, and that having uses that will provide vitality in a mix of uses is something to seek, but I don't think it precludes this type of use within it. I am comfortable with this and I support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Gravy.
Thank you. I also appreciate the discussion. I found this to be an interesting one to read through with the backstory. It seems like there was some intentionality in thinking about anticipating concerns with these types of developments with the lot size and, incorporating other types of uses on the space. I can understand the appeal of this type of medical office park in that area. It's, good jobs. It's like fellow commissioner said, it's diversity in use. And while I can understand some of the concerns about traffic, I thought that the responses adequately, address those concerns. And I think it's an interesting thing. I also think that, the way that site is designed now does not have, a lot of aesthetic appeal. And once the I know there's some good uses to it, but in terms of a lot of visible parking lot, and once the Wadsworth project finished up, I think it'll be, it'll make more sense to, if the opportunity is there, to consider some redevelopment on that space. So I appreciate the conversation and all the work from staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Hedges.
I wasn't expecting to go next. Yeah, it was, I do, thank you for coming in. I appreciate, first of all the work you do, period. So thank you for all of that. Just like in the healthcare profession, I was there last week. And so, and this was an interesting one, I think mainly because it's my first one and I was very hesitant about it. Because I was at an urgent care facility last Sunday, so it was on my mind and happened to be looking at these things anyways, and community clinics. And so my concern was definitely around like fitting into the vision of what Wadsworth is. And I think those build to requirements kind of ease that to a degree. And so I'm still kind of debating it in my head, I think is probably the way I want to put it. I still don't know if it's what I still don't know if it fits into the vision that I think Wadsworth has. And I want to make sure it's nothing against, obviously, your business. I appreciate and like want your business. I just think a community clinic in an urgent care facility only makes more sense at this location, as opposed to a freestanding emergency room. And so I just want to make sure, I guess I'm clear as to why I'm going that direction with it. And that's why I think, from my view, why I'm still hesitant for the freestanding emergency room aspect of it, is because medical offices, which include the urgent care facilities and the community clinics in that definition, are still allowed. And I just feel like that's in a more appropriate direction for this part of town. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Disney.
Thank you for answering our questions tonight. I am not persuaded, but I've come to realize that this would be a nice addition to our community, especially since I spent 15 weeks watching The Pit on HBO. I just want to know, is that realistic? No. It's about an emergency room, in case you didn't know. So I think that this will be, I don't have concerns for traffic. You answered my concerns about noise with ambulances, and I am in support of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore.
Nothing further at this time.
Thank you. There's no more discussion. We'll have a poll of the commission.
Motion carried 5-1.
Thanks, everyone, for good discussion, and we'll move on to our second item on the agenda. Commissioner Disney, would you introduce that, please?
Case number Z0A-25-2, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning residential occupancy limits.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a staff report? Mr. Cutler.
There is, and hopefully brief. The item tonight is to talk about residential occupancy limits within our municipal code, both to comply with state legislation and also recent voter-approved update to the city charter. City Council did discuss this code amendment at a study session in March and directed us to proceed with an ordinance. And we worked with our city attorney's office on this one, just because it's a little bit more complicated than some of the things. Just so everyone is aware, the state of Colorado passed a few bills in the 2024 legislative session related to land use and housing. This is one of them. Was House Bill 241007, which was called Prohibit Residential Occupancy Limits. Basically what it does is it prohibits municipalities from limiting the number of people who can live together in a single dwelling unit or house based on familial relationships and whether or not people are related. Occupancy is still able to be regulated based on other standards such as building codes or health and safety standards to prevent overcrowding or to meet any sort of affordable housing program guidelines. And this bill actually took effect last summer. And then in November of this past year, the city charter was modified by voters as part of a cleanup measure, ballot measure 2B, to remove references specifically to family unit, which was defined as 3 unrelated persons living together in a single housekeeping unit. And that approval actually put the city charter into compliance with the state law, but the rest of our code is not in compliance. So there's a few things in our code that would need to be cleaned up in order to get us to align with our charter, the voter-approved charter amendment and the state law. Mostly those are references to family or family unit. We do have a definition of family and then other definitions that rely on the term family to calculate a maximum number of residents that can live in a dwelling unit. We actually have a section on occupancy limits that was, from what I could find, created in 2012, but dates back even earlier than that, which includes a limit on 3 unrelated persons living together. So the proposed code amendment, in this case, updates the occupancy limits to be based on the maximum permitted by our adopted building codes or state and federal regulations. So it removes that specific number from the code, in this case 3, and instead bases the occupancy limit on those health and safety standards in the building code. There's not a specific number assigned to units in the building code. I don't have that. But it's basically related to crowding, and it has to do with the size of the dwelling, exits, things like that. This will then allow us to significantly simplify section 26638, which is the occupancy section. In case anyone was wondering, group homes have their own regulations, and those are not being modified. So a group living situation or a registered group home, those have their own occupancy limits that are different from what we're talking about today. So the big thing this code amendment does is it actually will remove the definition of family from our code. There's no need for it anymore because nothing else is based on it. We don't want to have things in our code that are not necessary anymore. And it also is going to modify a few definitions related to that term family or family unit because it's no longer necessary to regulate the number of individuals. And we talked about this a bit at council, but originally, when we saw the state legislation and the charter amendment being approved, we were a little bit skeptical, but we really don't have concerns with these changes because, one, the occupancy limits based on familiar relations were really challenging to prove. So you could go to someone's house and say, are you related? And they could say yes, and that's kind of the end of the story. And also, if there were roommates living together, placing that limit at 3 may have the effect of not filling bedrooms in a larger home and may limit housing options for roommates or unmarried individuals. And we know that the group home regulations are still going to remain in effect. So those have their own regulations, and because they're not being modified, we're not concerned about any impacts that this ordinance will have. So like I said, this amendment will put us into compliance with both the state law and our charter, and it's best practice that all of those parts of the code and charter will line up. That's all. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll open the hearing for public comment. I see no one in the room. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments from commissioners? I'll start with Commissioner Wood.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the staff report, and I appreciate the thoroughness of going through and looking at every instance in the code where the term family was referenced and other things that had to be removed in order to comply with state law. I really don't have any questions. I think in many ways, this is simply, we must comply with state law. We must be consistent with the city charter. I think this does that. I guess perhaps one question, is there anything or any changes that have been made or proposed that go beyond what state law would require? I'm assuming that these are really, if there's something different from state law, it's simply for clarity's sake.
Nothing that I can think of in our code where we would not be fully in compliance. I'm trying to think of how you could go further because this is pretty permissive.
Right.
I guess it would just depend on which adopted building code cities have. So ours is, I don't remember our exact, and we re-adopt the building code every few years. So if those standards change, then ours would too, but it kind of defaults to that building code now.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Grady?
When you all were looking into this, just out of curiosity, did you have any instance where anyone was actually found in violation? I mean, had it ever been enforced?
I talked to Lauren about this a little bit. I don't know if you heard this. Code enforcement relatively recently cited someone with this. I think it was under the unrelated individuals, not realizing that the charter had already been amended. And so it's really just best practice to codify everything. I think it's rare. I think it was, I mean, if I had to speculate, it was probably based on one or two bad actors now 15 plus years ago, why this is in the code. But I don't have the history. I know a lot of communities had that limit on unrelated individuals in the code though. Did that help?
Yeah, that's my only question.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore?
I really don't have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Disney?
No questions.
Commissioner Hedges?
No, I think this was a good staff report, honestly. After I read through it, I didn't really have any questions. I did have a thought of, oh, we're removing family from the code. But other than that, I thought this was, well done, so I have no comments.
Thank you. Can I get a motion, Commissioner Disney?
I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding residential occupancy limits and making conforming amendments therewith.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? I'll start to my left. Commissioner Hedges?
No.
No comment.
None?
Nothing.
Yeah, thank you. I just a couple quick comments. I find this to be a kind of positive development throughout because I think that there was very little enforcement and there was a lot of communities who had this, and so it just sounded odd. And frankly, as someone who rented rooms in houses on a number of occasions. I don't know, when we have a housing affordability challenge the way we do now, to have things that inherently try to limit an efficient use of, these single family homes that have multiple bedrooms that are not being utilized just seems silly. There was a home that was sold about a year and a half ago across the street from me, and relative to the neighborhood, a younger person purchased it, and she has, roommates, and they are just fantastic neighbors. They brought vitality to the block. There's, music coming out of their house, and so I think it's a positive thing, and I appreciate the fact that we are taking action on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wood?
I will just add to what I said before, that we are in a time where we have a great shortage of housing in general and affordable housing in particular, and I think that helps fill that void, although there'll be a lot of different ways that we need to address to fill that void. But this is one way, and I think it's a good move.
Thank you. There is no other discussion. We'll have a poll of the commission.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Our next agenda item, could you present, Commissioner Hedges?
Of course. The next agenda item is case number ZOA-25-3. An ordinance amending section 26-646 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regulating accessory dwelling units and making conforming amendments therewithin.
Thank you. Mr. Cutler, will you present the staff report?
I will. This item is a consideration to amend Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws to update the ADU requirements, both to comply with state legislation and also recent policy direction from City Council. And I did attach a draft ordinance. So this is another one of the state legislative bills from 2024 related to land use and housing. Discussed this at City Council on March 17th, and they advised us to proceed with an ordinance for consideration. That bill was House Bill 24-1152, called ADUs, and it requires municipalities to allow ADUs on any property containing a single unit home, and it also requires an administrative approval process for ADUs, meaning no public hearings. Great news, Wheat Ridge did this in 2022, so we're compliant with the bulk of that state legislation already. The bill does also contain some provisions ensuring communities are not being overly restrictive on ADUs. A lot of these were related to restrictions on size, setback, or design, and then some other things I'll get into today. This bill takes effect June 30th, 2025, and it also will require municipalities to submit a report to the state demonstrating compliance by that date. Wheat Ridge, I think, was one of the last communities in the Front Range to allow ADUs, but our regulations were more permissive, I believe, than some other communities in terms of where ADUs were allowed and size and things like that. And so, like I said, we're largely in compliance with the requirements of the House bill because we already allow ADUs as a use by right on any property containing a single unit dwelling. So there were only 3 provisions in the entire bill, which was very long, where the city does only partially complies. I would say we were not uncompliant on any of them. But one of those is the size of the ADU, one was owner occupancy requirements, and the last one was ADUs in planned developments or PUDs. So the first one I'll just go into real quickly is related to size of ADUs. The House bill requires that all ADUs are always allowed between 750 square feet in size. And the intent behind this is to ensure that an ADU is large enough to accommodate a one bedroom and adequate kitchen and bathing facilities. That doesn't mean you can't have a tiny home, but a typical one bedroom apartment is within that range. And so they're meant to feel comparable there. The city's ADU size restrictions right now are based on the size of the primary dwelling unit, so the main house on the property, and ADUs are limited to 50% of the square footage of that house or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. But what's come up is that a lot of houses in East Wheat Ridge are quite small, 800, 900 square feet, and then an ADU is only allowed to be 300, 400 square feet on those lots. That's actually really small to get an actual one bedroom and enough livable space for even a couple in some scenarios. So we don't have any concerns with this state bill in terms of the size being changed to allow those smaller ADUs. We will always have to allow that 500 to 750 square foot range. The only exception is if the main house is within that range, and then you can kind of make the ADUs equal. So if it was 750 square foot house, you could have a 749 square foot ADU. But yeah, so it's a little confusing, but it's really intended to still make the ADU subordinate to the main building on the property, but allow it to potentially be a little bit larger in order to include an actual bedroom in that space. So like I said, we didn't have any concerns with it. I think it was something we were considering and just didn't include in the original ordinance. I'm actually going to skip owner occupancy and come back to it. That's probably the longest discussion, but I'll quickly talk about planned developments. So we allow ADUs in a planned development and actually require them to be allowed if a single unit home is allowed in a planned development. So if you can build a house in a planned development, you can build a house in a regular zone district. That means you also should be allowed to build an ADU. We did not apply those retroactively. And what happened, state bill, is that there's a lot of communities are mostly planned developments, and they wanted this bill to apply to those communities as well. We were just not have a lot of planned developments for single unit homes, but they actually wanted to allow this property right retroactively so that someone in a planned development that was approved 40 years ago that had enough space could still build an ADU as long as it was following the other restrictions in the planned development standards, design, setbacks, size, things like that. It's just expanding the property right to apply to planned developments that were approved prior to 2022 in our case. So lastly, owner occupancy. The House bill prohibits owner occupancy requirements for ADUs with the goal of removing barriers to ADU construction and financing. Right now, our code does require owner occupancy, which means that the owner of the property either has to live in the main house or the ADU, and that's demonstrated by recording a deed restriction against the property saying that the owner must live on site. The House bill prevents that blanket approach to owner occupancy that we've taken and instead kind of breaks owner occupancy out into 3 scenarios. The first being with new development, so concurrent construction, ADU and house being built at the same time, cities can no longer require owner occupancy. So that would require us to remove that from our code. If an ADU is being used as a short-term rental, cities can enforce owner occupancy, and we currently do that. If you have a short-term rental on your property and it's an ADU, you have to live on site, and you actually have to be on site. So we're going to continue to do that, and the state legislation allows us to continue that. That's the real only exception at this point for owner occupancy. There's another scenario that the state presented where if you have an existing house and someone wants to build an ADU on their lot, the bill would allow a city to require evidence of owner occupancy, but only at time of permit application. You can't follow up with them years later and say, are you the owner? Do you live on the property? You can't do the deed restriction. So it's really just a point in time. But it also allows communities to just not require it at all. And after speaking with council, we are not planning on requiring any sort of proof of owner occupancy at time of submittal, purely because it's unenforceable as soon as the permit is issued. We do recognize the importance of requiring owner occupancy as part of the original ordinance, but after about 2.5 years of implementing it, we've found a lot of trouble with that regulation. It's quite similar to what we talked about with occupancy, where one, it's hard to track people down. We've had trouble getting people to sign it. Some people have not wanted to move forward with projects because they don't want to be limited by this deed restriction. And we still believe that ADUs are relatively expensive to construct anyway. So construction costs, labor costs, tap fees, those are the more prohibitive factors than this owner occupancy requirement, which would be removed. We don't believe ADUs would continue to proliferate more than they already have, although it does reduce some barriers and a lot of staff time, to be honest. So I think originally, again, council was skeptical of removing this provision. Some of it comes down, frankly, to home rule and us, having an ordinance that was successful 2.5 years ago. And we also need to learn from implementing an ordinance for 2.5 years and recognizing that this has been a real challenge and likely will not have as big of an impact as originally intended. So the ordinance will make a few changes. It'll clarify the size restrictions of ADUs. It'll remove those owner occupancy requirements except for when they are short-term rentals. It will delete the sections on deed restrictions from our code. It will update the planned development regulations, and it will also update all of our development standards charts just to have a footnote regarding that size exception for ADUs. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. I will open the hearing to public comment. I don't see anyone here, nobody on Zoom. Close the public hearing. and go to questions from the commission. Commissioner Heads.
Yeah, just a quick question about the minimum size. So it sounds like you explained that it's allowed between 500 and 750, with the caveat of if it's 600, it can't be 650, right? But if you have a 600 square foot home, could you build a 300-foot ADU still?
Yes, there's no minimum size to ADUs. The only minimum would be a building code. So even the building code regulates how small a tiny house can be. There's some minimum, but nothing in the zoning code. So someone could elect to go smaller if they wanted to.
Okay, but it is regulated by the building code, which is kind of that.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Disney.
No questions.
Commissioner Moore.
No questions.
Commissioner Gravy.
I guess I just need clarification on that last question. So I thought the 500 to 750 was a minimum in order to allow for the bathing kitchen thing. And so that response, I guess, confused me a little bit.
It is a little confusing. So it's not a minimum, but it is a right that anyone has. So someone could elect to go smaller, but there's always that right to go within that range. The only exception to that is if the house itself is within that range, and then it's limited by the house, the primary house size.
Okay, and so to drag that out a little bit, just out of curiosity, because you brought up the tiny home, question, are tiny homes permitted if they do not meet the same requirements of an ADU, which my understanding is water service and plumbing and this kind of thing? A lot of tiny homes, as far as I understand it, are kind of on the lot, but and are habitable in terms of like a well-built structure, but they might not have utilities directly to them. Is that permitted in the city?
No. So tiny homes are allowed, and we've adapted, I don't remember, whatever in the building code that allows tiny homes, but they have to be on permanent foundations. So you can't live in a tiny home on wheels. They don't have utilities. You can't meet the building code. So we have seen, I have approved at least one tiny home, technically ADU, but it was on a permanent foundation. It has water and sewer. And it was about 220 square feet. But that's not for everyone. So that's why this legislation speaks to that allowable range.
Gotcha. And then my last question is just so I understand the owner occupancy, issue. So the original ordinance that was it 2022 you said, or 23, something like that? The intention there was to discourage someone who owned a property and has it as a rental unit and then had an additional rental unit as the ADU. Was that like the concern, that they didn't want that to proliferate just because of, I don't know, community character and increased challenges with managing rental on that space? I don't know, whatever.
That was something that came up for sure. In 2022, when we were working this ordinance, staff originally actually recommended against owner occupancy requirements, but that was something that was important to council at the time, and we ended up putting in the ordinance. I think we had taken a very conservative approach on ADUs, and we wanted to make sure that the ordinance at that time could be successful. And that was something that council had heard from the community, that they were concerned about proliferation of ADUs, specifically rentals. We don't regulate rentals of any other type in the city. So if you own a house, you can rent it out. If you own a duplex, you can rent out both units.
Yeah.
So having that kind of secondary class of ADUs where there was then a restriction was something we did recommend against, but ultimately went with in the ordinance. And that's one of the reasons that you just brought up, was that concern about the double unit income property, basically, or proliferation of more rentals in neighborhoods.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Wood.
I really just have a question out of curiosity. I had heard routinely that proliferation of ADUs is not common because of the cost to actually build them. And I was just wondering, after Wheat Ridge, after we approved our ordinance in 2022, do we have a number, like how many have come in? How many have been built?
I don't have an exact number.
Ballpark.
But there's been a decent amount. I won't say that they've proliferated because they haven't. But the fact that we're approving at least, a couple every quarter, means that our ordinance is allowable, permissive enough that people are choosing to do them. But they're not proliferating widely. The number one cost is the tap fees.
I have heard that as well. No, thank you.
Thanks for your report, Scott. One question that kind of overlaps with the last ordinance is, it's going to be kind of weird, and I think I know the answer, but Pat has a 1,000 square foot house, and then I build a 500 square foot ADU. How many people can be on my lot?
That's a great question for our building official. Not totally sure.
Okay.
It's based on bedrooms and size of the bedrooms and things like that.
Yeah, because I think I listened to the council meeting where they were talking about this, and I think there was a concern that we were going to have frat houses. That kind of came up, that we were going to have, 30 people living on a lot with main house and then an ADU, and it was going to be a little crazy. So I just thought I'd ask how many people can be there. Can you speak to one thing that did come up also in the council meeting? They were talking about like a group home environment or something. Can you speak to how this all correlates?
Yes, absolutely. So we have regulations for group homes in our code right now. Most group homes are limited to 8 individuals. They're unrelated. So group homes kind of already were more than that 3 unrelated individuals. But they're regulated totally separately in terms of occupancy. So they have state regulations to meet. They've got federal regulations, federal fair housing regulations to meet. This, I guess, that last ordinance did not change that. So there was, I think, some fear around that. There was an article that I personally think was a bit misleading that talked about, this is going to allow a group home of 40 unrelated individuals in this neighborhood, and that's not accurate. And we confirm with our city attorney that does not affect our group home regulations. So those will continue to be regulated. And then, ADUs, I mean, you could have an ADU in a group home setting, but they would still be governed by those group home regulations.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? May I have a motion?
Do I read the motion here now? Okay, cool. I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending section 26-646 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws regarding accessory dwelling units and making conforming amendments therewithin.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. May I have a poll of the council? I mean commission.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. I think that concludes all of that business. Moving on to old business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have any old business. Would you like me to move into new business?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So upcoming dates, May 1st, you should have seen an email. We're not going to have a meeting for lack of agenda items. We will have a meeting on May 15th. And then I was going to, let me try and share kind of a fun map with you, because you guys don't always know what we're working on, and I give you project updates. Clerk Creek Crossing, Hampton Inn is close. They're probably going to have a TCO for stocking and storing, and then training, and then a full CO soon, hopefully. And then Primrose Daycare is under construction over at Clerk Creek Crossing. Any other big ones that you can think of? Yeah, Lookout is getting close. That's also over in Clear Creek Crossing. But I was going to show you a map that we actually use this with our quarterly agencies. And if I can get connected here. Come on. 1997. It's stuck. Bear with me. I'm in
Isn't technology great?
technical issues. Yeah, that's really weird. Hold on one second. No. Don't have a document map. It wasn't the incorrect. I know.
It's a great map.
It's a fun map because you can really see how busy we are, and it doesn't change a whole lot from month to month. As far as number of projects.
Isn't that a map on?
It's not.
It's not our projects.
Ooh. Oh, okay, it's not our projects and properties map. It's actually an internal map that we use it separately. It's a Google map, and the reason that we use it is because we move from west to east and go through each of the projects with our water, sanitation, Excel, fire, how many people would you say we normally have at a meeting? I mean, we might have 20 to 30 people at a meeting on a Zoom. Oh, that's weird. My screensaver's showing up.
No, it's showing up what's up there.
That is I looked it up. It's yes, that's what it is. I don't know why this is not showing up. Hang on one sec. Just close out anything there. Okay, let's try that again. Why? I'm really having some difficulties here. Why would it not be sharing?
Is it permissible to ask questions about previous projects that we have voted on and approved, but appear not to be going anywhere, and just kind of wondering what happened to them?
Sure.
So I have two. One would be the daycare center over here on 38th next to, no, on 38th, just west of like the pierogi restaurant and the nail.
Kind of next to the IMVF or something like that building, part of the,
Yeah, the house next to, just west of Vanola's. There was going to be a daycare there.
I think that's under review. I'm pretty sure that's Stephanie's,
Okay,
but it might be pretty early still.
okay. And then the other one was the apartments that were going to be built on 38th over there off of, by Harlan, east of Harlan, where they tore down all the houses and then, yeah, where iPi was.
Yep, that was called Judy
Judy,
Townhomes.
yeah.
Yep. So that developer, I don't. It was in the news that you may have seen. Essentially went bankrupt, and so we've actually gotten a lot of renewed interest recently in that development. A lot of builders are really interested in picking that project back up, but that was the reason why they didn't move forward, because they don't exist anymore. So.
Okay, good to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the map that we use in our quarterly meeting with our outside agencies. And I'll walk you through just the Rs, the big red Rs on here, they're under review. So all these projects all across the city from west to east and north to south, those are all under review. The ones that are kind of a purple construction guy with a shovel, kind of bluish, those are public projects. So those are CIP projects, so roadway, sidewalks, things like that. The green thumbs up means it's been approved pending construction. So we don't have an approved building permit for it yet. The purple hammers, those are all under construction right now. And then we do have one or two investigating the binoculars. The gray binoculars are investigating, so they're in the pre-application process at this point. So anyway, just wanted you to know there's about 50 on here in total. And so those are the projects that we're working on right now. Some you won't see, but others you might.
Wow, outstanding. Appreciate it. Anything else, Jana?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay,
Thanks.
Any commissioner reports? We'll start with our brand new first-time commissioner, Commissioner Wood.
You know, I have no report. I just wanted to say I'm glad to be here. It's a learning experience for me. I've been a planner for about, not quite 30 years, but more than half of that has been in transportation. So I've definitely been a bit out of touch with land use and the cadence and tenor of the work that goes on at local government. And I've been here in Wheat Ridge for 32 years. So to be part of this is really exciting for me. And I have a learning curve, and I'm looking forward to it. It's nice to meet you all, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Grady.
Well, welcome, Commissioner Wood. I'm sure look forward to having someone with your experience and background on the commission, and appreciate you being here. I was going to ask a quick question and make a comment on, this is probably not in your wheelhouse exactly. So sometimes I tend to veer into kind of the like public works, but on the I frequently ride 35th on a bicycle, and my understanding is there is plans to put a bike lane on there, and I just don't know if that's in the works or what the status of from Sheridan to Pierce, we'll say. But I also, as I ride that, I realize there's some work going on at Panorama Park, like on the sidewalk area. There's a bunch of orange construction fencing all just kind of within the last week. Do you know what they're doing there? Are they doing like a sidewalk thing on 35th or what's going on there?
Rocky, our engineering manager, and I looked at that one. That's a minor parks project. I think they're redoing the parking area, and I think it was a tennis court remodel as well. But that's probably why there's work out there. I think they're kind of realigning that parking area. I don't know the status of the 35th project. That would be, we'd have to check on that.
Yeah, well, would that sort of thing that'd be publicly available somewhere, right? Or is it, because it's not on like the project's map because it's like too small. So is that something that someone would have to kind of?
That might be
ask
a
the
mill and
city?
overlay and restriping. That might be what is going on there.
I think a good portion of the park is like fenced off at this point. So
I'm talking about like 35th.
oh yeah, the 35th.
Yeah.
You're talking about the lane, the bike lane?
I've got a CIP project list, but I wasn't prepared to talk about it.
Okay.
So-
Well, no worries. I just, because
But if you
actually,
ping-
now that you mentioned, I think they did restripe it, and I was like, well, I thought they were going to put a lane here.
Yeah, if you have questions like that, just ping me a couple days before the meeting,
Okay.
and I can get answers for you. Because I do have lots of lists and lots of resources. I just don't have them on the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
We've just talked about that being a logical connectivity point for bike thoroughfare.
Yeah.
but- Okay, but
There's going to be quite a bit of mill and overlay projects with restriping, so that may,
sure.
I'm guessing that might be what it is. But yeah, just ping me and I'll find out everything I can for you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Commissioner Moore?
I had the opportunity on Tuesday to go to an open house at the Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to make mention. I had the opportunity to meet the owner of Gastown, a new bar and restaurant. It's opening up on 29th, and great experience. Really nice gentleman. Love the layout. And I would encourage everybody to swing by and take a look at what they're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Disney.
I got nothing.
Your edges.
When is Gastown opening? Do you know?
So when I spoke with Finn, he was shooting for, what is the next major holiday weekend? Memorial Day. I think that they have their liquor license hearing on the 24th.
Good, we'll update our building department. We haven't heard much on that lately, so.
Yeah, I think it's a cool adaptive reuse. So I'm glad you brought it up because I go to Edgewater Public Market and right past it. So I'm like, when? I want to stop here. So that's good to know. Memorial Day is coming up. I do think they're rebuilding the tennis courts. I saw a city council meeting, I think, or something. They were talking about it, but I think that's the plan. I don't really have anything on updates from my end. I actually had a thought and then it disappeared. It would have been great, and I'll have to remember for next time. So May 15th, I'll have a better update for you. That's everything I got for now.
Thank you. Yeah. I have many thoughts that just are gone all the time. So they're up in the cloud with mine. Oh, good.
I remember I was, so I sometimes bother engineering and public works because, it's fun. And I just want to say, I appreciate how quickly, the planning department and the engineering department gets back, because there was a construction there on 38 that was blocking the sidewalk. And I was like, this doesn't seem right. They're just telling people to cross, but there's no crosswalk. And so I emailed the engineering, and the next morning they're like, oh yeah, we checked. No, they're not supposed to do that. And then I walked past there again that afternoon, and they have not been blocking the sidewalk since then. So I appreciate local government and what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. We always appreciate compliments. It's nice working for a smaller government. I've also worked for larger governments, and they're not as efficient. So it's nice. We all know each other. We know how to get answers and things done. So thank you. And welcome, Susan.
Thank you. I attended a town hall with District 3 with Corey over at, I'm going to butcher this name, Denolia's over there. Well attended, very informational. Went, actually almost hour and a half, close to 2 hours. Plenty of good conversation, a lot of interaction. So coffee with the mayor pro tem at this point in time. Yeah. So it was good, well attended, appreciate, again, all the public works and everything that's going on. And with that, that's all I really have right now. I'd ask for a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Motion approved, 6-0.
Thank you. Next meeting, May 15th. Thank you all. Appreciate you. I wonder what happens if we all vote no on adjourning. Yeah.